Welcome to another Asian Agribiz podcast. Today, we touch on the topic of how yet another crisis is going to affect grain movement in Asia. The editor of Asian Feed magazine, Zara Imtiaz, talks to analysts from S&P Global Commodity Insights, Mohammed Al-Ansare and Melvin Kwok, on what they expect the markets to look like with the crisis at hand. They say despite the tensions and uncertainty, there just might be some light at the end of the tunnel for Asia.
Hi Mo, hi Melvin. Thank you for joining us from S&P Global Commodity Insights. Today we're going to discuss a very serious and concerning issue for everybody in the feed and commodity markets. That is the Red Sea crisis and how it has been affecting grain markets and shipping. Mo, if you would like to start off, can you give us an introduction about what you do and what you bring to this podcast?
Hi, Zara. Yeah, of course. I'm Mo Al-Ansare. I work on the containers market reporting desk. I'm a senior pricing specialist in EMEA shipping and containers. We look at container prices, container news, and how things affect shipping rates in general. So just to go into it quite briefly, from October the 7th, we saw much volatility between now and then. So today is the 31st of January. Shipping prices have seen much volatility, and they're in terms of container prices, they have skyrocketed between now and then. So we saw, let's say, from the middle of October till about the middle of January, an almost 700% increase in prices. So this is looking at North Asia to North Europe. So we monitor those two markets. In terms of that specific market, it saw a huge increase in terms of rates, and it was almost a black swan event, unprecedented, and no one in the market could have predicted what happened. Of course, things had developed based on the political instability, the issues around the Red Sea, the Houthi rebel attacks on various ships, including container ships and other ships. More recently, we've seen their attacks on tankers. Since then, so since the middle of January, we've seen almost a drop-off in container rates. Post-Chinese New Year, it looks like rates have dropped a little bit, but they haven't dropped down back to levels where we saw back in October and November. So it looks like rates will be pushed up, and there are multiple reasons for this. So due to the political instability, what happened was a lot of companies, including the big container lines, the big carriers, they started rerouting shipments around the Cape of Good Hope instead of going through the Suez Canal and risking getting their ships attacked, getting their crews attacked, and risking their shipments, their cargoes in general. So this, of course, has a knock-on effect on the amount of time it takes for shipments to transit from Asia, Europe, and also other locations. So in general, you can witness a 30% increase in the transit time. So when a transit used to take about 20 to 25 days, it increased by about 10 days. So this is one way. And then also it has to go back, right? The ship has to go back, so it increases even more.
So there are two things at play here. One is delays in shipping, and the other is the rising cost of shipping.
Exactly. And the rising cost is affected by the longer transit, right? So the longer transit means the ship has to use more fuel. It probably means for the shipping lines, they have to spend more money on crew because they have to use them for a longer period of time. There are also other things come into play, like emissions, because now that's a really hot topic in terms of in Europe. Decarbonization is a big focus for some of the big container lines, and they need to adhere to certain rules, especially from January the 1st onwards. Now the EU ETS surcharges are now in place from the carriers. They've started charging on each container a small fee. It's not too big at the moment, but it could change with this because the current fee was based on shipments transversing or traversing through the Suez Canal. Now we're going around the Cape of Good Hope. It probably means that this fee is going to go up too. So the other thing to mention is because it's taking so long to go around the Cape of Good Hope and go around Africa, it means the service levels are going to be affected somewhat. So they can't, the carriers can't give the same services as previously because let's say they were doing a weekly service before. So every week they'd have a ship come in and sail. Now that it's more difficult to do that because they'll have to change their scheduling because of the time it takes is longer. So it means that will also have a knock-on effect on what they can offer their clients and customers. So there were a few issues that maybe have become solutions. So overcapacity was something that was really a hot topic again in the container shipping world. People were saying that the carriers have too many ships and they've got too much resources, too much supply for the demand. The demand wasn't reaching the supply in terms of the demand for shipments. So people were worried that the prices won't be increased. But of course, what happened with the Red Sea had a huge knock-on effect on that, and that's changed things. But now, what can be done probably by the carriers is to use those extra vessels, use that overcapacity to fill potentially the services that they maybe need to support or supplement because of the difference in scheduling and the difference in transit times.
So how does this look for buyers in Asia who are like looking to export or either import commodities into the continent? Do you think that cost of insurance is going to go up, the commodity is going to go up? Like, how would you see it affecting them?
Right. Well, the cost of insurance has definitely gone up for shipments sailing through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. In fact, there are some companies, insurance companies now, which say we're not going to cover any shipments that go through the Red Sea. What's interesting is most companies, like I said, most container liner companies are rerouting their shipments via the Cape of Good Hope and avoiding the Suez Canal. But there are still some vessels, which aren't too many, but they're very few. So, for example, a company by the name of CMA CGM, a French container liner, some of their vessels are still going through the Suez Canal. And the effects of what's happening on the commodity, I'll pass on to Melvin for him to share his insights.
Thank you, Mo. Just one last question. Like, did the retaliation by the US and other aligned forces actually give confidence to the shipping markets? Did it kind of be like, okay, now it's safe to go through, or is there a market still uncertain about what's going to happen?
I think it caused much more uncertainty. So the container liners can see now that because both parties who are facing each other now, so the US and the Houthi rebels, they're both not standing down, I would say, and they're both going for it. So in terms of the shipping and container shipping, you see most carriers are expecting in the near to mid-term to carry on sailing via the Cape of Good Hope, and they don't think that there will be a solution in the short term, for sure. And they're preparing for this. They've prepared for this. They've started releasing, new rates. They've starting, calculating new emission charges, and that's something that is probably going to stay is here to stay for the short term, for sure. And there is still much uncertainty in terms of how it's going to develop, what's going to happen next. But it's all dependent on what happens in the conflict in the Middle East.
Sure.
If a resolution isn't found and the attacks don't stop, then the container liners and the carriers will carry on avoiding the Red Sea and trying to avoid getting hit and looking after their crew and their staff and the safety of their ships too, because it doesn't look like that is slowing down at all.
Yeah. But I noticed that the prices haven't reached the highs of COVID yet.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's
that's
right.
positive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely that is a positive. It has been a huge increase, but at the same time, I don't think the impact has been as large as COVID. And also, I think supply chain resilience is something that we need to discuss. The carriers and the shipping lines, they are more prepared for things like this based on what's happened between the time COVID and the coronavirus. They were shocked probably at the time, but now they know and they have prepared for things like this to happen. So they've got various strategies that they could employ and different opportunities available to them for them to change things and amend their supply chains so that they try to cater as well as possible for their customers. And that meant the impact wasn't as large and as strong as coronavirus and the COVID pandemic, because yeah, they're ready for it. But at the same time, I think also it's not as a large event as the coronavirus pandemic. It's something that they're working around it. They've changed the sailings in terms of the trade routes and the loops, and they've also started amending different services. So we can see in the Mediterranean, for example, they've amended a lot of their services, some of the carriers. So they've changed how they interconnect with different ports, and because they have to go around Africa, it means that they have to bunker at other ports, which means they have to refuel at other ports. So that's something else which we're keeping an eye on, and also they're bringing services together. So wherever possible, I think they're probably what they do is they might stop off at a port, unload to a feeder vessel, so a vessel which isn't as big as maybe some of the larger vessels that they have available, and then they will move that on to the Mediterranean or maybe a less popular destination.
True. Thank you, Mo.
No
That
problem.
brings us to Melvin, actually. We thought 2022 was a nightmare, but then 2024 opens up with more problems for commodity markets. Melvin, how does it look for Asian buyers with this whole crisis unfolding?
Hi, I'm Melvin. I look after the Asian feed markets for S&P Global Commodity Insights, where I look into the prices of corn, wheat, soybean meal, and other major feed ingredients. And so back to the question, where you ask how can different feed buyers manage the potential issues in 2024. Given that 2022 was a challenging year, and why 2022 was a challenging year was because of the war in Ukraine, and before that there was a lot of different supply tightness from the various key producing regions in the world. So in 2022 we saw that Ukraine was invaded, and after that, agricultural commodities face issues being shipped out of Ukraine, and Ukraine is a big producer of both corn and wheat, and a large volume of the supplies comes to Asia. However, in 2024, we started the year with a different kind of risk where shipping is affected by the conflict that's happening in the Middle East, more notably voyages that are going through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. However, Asian buyers are less impacted this time around because most of the commodities that they are getting comes from South America, and they have very little exposure to the Black Sea. mostly volumes that coming. So the situation out of the Red Sea would affect mostly shipments out of the Black Sea, which is shipments of corn and wheat out of um, Ukraine, Russia, Constanza, which is Romania, and Varna and Burgas out of Bulgaria.
And we have seen considerable reduction in imports from the Black Sea to Asia, isn't it? People have
Yeah,
diversified.
yeah. So when the war hit in Ukraine, many buyers in Asia have gotten used, and it's kind of like a base case scenario whereby they do not anticipate and expect much volumes to flow out of the Ukraine, except for China, who had been taking significant volumes of corn from Ukraine, even during the war in the last close to 2 years.
Okay. I think maybe Mo also can chip in here. What about the risk in the Panama Canal? I heard weather-related drought actually is bringing in some risk there, and maybe shipping is getting affected from there. So,
Right, yeah. So with the Panama Canal, from time to time it has trouble based on seasonality with uh, the droughts and the number of vessels that can pass through the Panama Canal. Normally, there's almost a queue and a queuing system, and there's a number of waiting days which have to be adhered to when you decide to pass through the Panama Canal. And as a result of that, some shippers decide to move their cargo via a different route. So a lot of shipments going from US Gulf to Asia, for example, started changing their route through the Suez Canal. So instead of going through the Panama Canal, they ad ad adjusted their routes through the Suez. Whereas with what's going on now in terms of the conflict and how it's affected the shipments in the Suez, they've had to go around the Cape of Good Hope too. So not only were they started avoiding the Panama Canal because of the number of waiting days and the droughts and the issues there, but they also started avoiding the Suez Canal too. And that meant, again, it would have a knock-on effect on the shipping prices. The transit time would take longer, and as a result, that's something else which will affect the supply chain and how things in terms of supply are readily available to the market.
yeah, with a double whammy. Would
Exactly.
this affect commodity prices, Melvin? Like, would this do we expect increases into Asia?
Yeah, just to begin and make it clear, there's very little supplies from the US Gulf coming to Asia currently. A lot of the grains and oilseeds are being supplied either from the Pacific Northwest, which it goes through the Pacific routes from the west coast of the US to Asia, and also from Argentina and Brazil. So the base case of the shipments in bulk wouldn't have used either the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal, even if with or without droughts or tensions in these two key shipping routes. So this has kind of alleviated any price risk and price volatility on the shipping aspect. And yeah,
Oh, so
so
we don't have to worry about commodities like increasing. This is a worry I think a lot of buyers or grain people in the region were thinking about, oh no, is this going to affect our grain supply and prices? But you're saying we need not worry too much.
yeah, yes,
That's
that's right. So
that's good news.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, because we look at the demand. A lot of it is due to the demand and supply dynamics of both the grains and oilseeds. So the feed raw materials, if we look at it, Brazil, they have they are seeing back-to-back record harvest or back-to-back bumper crop of soybeans. They saw a record crop in 2023, and they're seeing another big crop. Yes, given there's been weather issues, the potential risk of downsides, but it's still going to be a massive crop in comparison to the past 10 years, and this has helped alleviate a lot of supply issues to destination buyers. And for corn, it's the same scenario as well, right? In Brazil, they had a big corn crop in 2023. However, this was diminished by a crop failure in Argentina. However, in 2024, we see Argentina reverting back to an average production of corn, and Brazil also producing a sizable amount of corn. So with the combined volumes of these two countries, the export flows would remain significant, and their natural route to Asia is through the Cape of Good Hope either way. So the knock-on effect of the Red Sea and the Panama Canal wouldn't be as large as what people would expect on the surface.
Finally, Melvin and Mo, I think the biggest question a lot of listeners would want to know is how prepared do we have to be? Do we have to buy well in advance this year also, or is the risk going to be short term and that we just have to ride this crisis through?
I think I'll take this first. I think ever since the war in Ukraine, buyers have started getting used to buying hand to mouth. They want to ensure the supplies and reduce the risk. And given the economic outlook today, the higher interest rates, the lower demand, it's also very difficult for them to plan demand that is well forward in advance. So I think the key message over here is buyers need to be flexible. They need to know what is happening in different key production regions, what is going on domestically in their own market, and be flexible in procuring from a different origin, and be flexible in substituting the feed grains as much as they can when they see the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, that's good advice. Mo, anything to add?
Yeah, so in terms of shipping, rates look like they're normalizing now as we lead into the Chinese New Year and post-Chinese New Year. It looks like the rates may stabilize a bit more and reach a level which is a bit more profitable for the shippers. So it looks like they are heading down slightly. That's the current trend. But I don't think they'll reach the lows that they were in terms of Q3, Q4, end of 2023. So it should be an interesting next year ahead. I think based on what happens in the Middle East, it will have a big impact on how the rates change.
Thanks, Mo. I think we've had a very interesting couple of years, and a lot of people are hoping for some boredom in markets. But thanks a lot to you and Melvin for joining us in the podcast and valuable insights.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to the podcast, and I hope you took away some key points on how grains will move in the future. Please subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Visit www.asian-agribiz.com for up-to-date information on the Asian animal protein industry.